afternoon. They say saving the best till last. No disrespect to anybody else that's spoken. We've had some fantastic presentations. Sorry for the internet challenges. I'm hopeful that we can hold out this afternoon. We're broadcasting from South Africa, Nigeria, and Glasgow in Scotland, just to throw in a little bit of excitement, bring the Scottish along. I'm really looking forward to this panel with some incredible panelists. My name's Jenny Froome, and I represent an organisation called SAPICS, based in South Africa. We're the professional body for supply chain management. And that's been something I've been doing for a very long time. And I'm also very lucky to have been involved as co-chair of MadeInAfrica and Africa Supply Chain in Action with Debbie and the amazing team that we've got working behind the scenes here. When I was talking yesterday to Michael, I think it's Sidakasa, he did a presentation about this very topic, about the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I asked him if he thinks it's a reality or if it's still a pipe dream. And we had some chat backwards and forwards, and I'm known to be a bit cynical, not just about this, but about quite a lot of things. And we actually agreed that it was a pipe dream, and it's become hope. And we are hopeful that together we can turn it into reality. And I think that that's something that we can base this conversation on. And at the AfCFTA conference last year, I shared the African proverb that if you want to go fast, you go alone. And if you want to go far, you should travel together. And I think that that's exactly what the essence of how we're going to get the free trade agreement to work is, that we have to do it together, and that we have to be talking from the same hymn sheet, and that we have to want the same outcomes. And I know we had a chat in the green room behind the scenes, because we have one representative at the moment from South Africa, and then we have three esteemed people from Nigeria. And Nigeria, as everybody knows, was one of the last countries to join or to sign the agreement. And I find that very interesting, because there was so much research done, there was so much backwardsing and forwardsing. And it's interesting to see that not every country has immediately embraced this. So I'm looking forward to some robust discussion for the next 60 minutes. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists. And I'll go in order of the screen that I'm seeing. So Salisu is the gentleman who's here from Scotland, and he assures me that the sun is shining and that it's warm. Originally from Nigeria, and he represents a company that's called NatQuest Limited. Then we've got Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is here from Lagos, and he is the Director General of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce. Try saying that quickly. Dr. Obiora Madu, who I've personally known for many, many years. He and I have traveled a long journey together in the world of education around supply chain management skills. And Dr. Madu joins us from Lagos, Nigeria as well. And he represents the Africa Center for Supply Chain in Nigeria. And then last but no means least, we've got Dr. Bheki Mfeka, who is a fellow South African and joining from just down the road from where I am. And he is a well-known and brilliant economic advisor and strategist. So I am in exceptionally good company. I would like to, in full transparency and disclosure, say that this was not planned to be a mammal, i.e. men only. We have had a few challenges with our lady participants. So we are definitely in diversity and no exclusion intended. So with that said, here we go. And let's put the first question out there. And it came from an earlier discussion this morning, and I'm going to address it to Salisu because he's got a very strong background in digitization and digital supply chains. And this question was around the thorny subject of corruption. and how are we going to reduce and mitigate the risks in specifically in the procurement space, called the supply chain space, that can really enable real empowerment and localization within the free trade agreement. So, Salisu, do you want to start the discussion around this, and then we can take it from there?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jenny. It's a pleasure to be here on this panel discussion. I think that's a very important question. Perhaps corruption is always an interesting topic to discuss in a kind of discussion like this. Perhaps looking at it from the technological perspective, obviously some emerging technologies like blockchain technology, the use of IoTs can definitely reduce or rather eliminate corruption in the AfCFTA agreements, or rather the whole settings. And what I mean by that exactly is to look at the core supply procurement pains that we have in most of these trade transactions. There are issues around transparency, which is very, very key. And how do we actually look at it from the point of view of technology? Now, you have to really work on creating the ecosystem. We are talking about the all participating countries, the industries, and perhaps the people that are involved in this transaction. So I think a technology like blockchain technology can bring all these parties together, irrespective of what they do or the nature of transaction they do. But that will create an avenue where you can have an end-to-end visibility around every transaction. But then the question is, are we yet there? Well, I would say not that much in terms of the commitment and the understanding of this particular technology. But I know from the information that is readily available, Nigeria is on top of exploring the innovation in blockchain technology. And of course, other countries like Rwanda are also on top of exploring the potential of blockchain technology. So in summary, I would say definitely blockchain technology, or rather other emerging technologies, can definitely fight corruption in a kind of settings like this. But importantly, we have to understand the dynamics of introducing this kind of technologies and understand the core areas where we are looking at in terms of implementing the technology and to what extent we can implement. And let me be very specific here. We have to look at the constraint of our diversity and what type of technology, particular nature of blockchain, if, for instance, we are considering blockchain as an option, what type of blockchain solution are we bringing on board? We have to really have a consensus and have a wider stakeholders engagement in order to understand where the technology can actually help in particular aspects of procurement. But definitely, I would say yes, technology adoption has a huge impact in fighting corruption, particularly in procurement.
Thanks, Salisu. Just to expand on that, because obviously technology is one aspect of how we can mitigate the risk of corruption, or how we can wipe out corruption eventually, and we all know it's a global problem. So, Dr. Yusuf, what's your take on this, and how would you work to mitigate the risks, the inherent risks that obviously are going to exist with this potential?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think it's more of an institutional problem, because when you have this problem of corruption, first, it depends on the framework in which operators are operating. It depends on the quality of governance, the political leadership. It depends on how transparent the processes are. And Salisu spoke at least a bit about that, because the more we apply technology to these processes, the more transparent they are likely to be. So the transparency of the process, the quality of governance is also very important. Because when it comes to procurement, particularly public sector procurement, it can really be very, very challenging because of the fact that there are always a whole lot of vested interests in the process, and the interests sometimes are not nationalistic in nature. People are looking for things to benefit themselves personally or benefit their cronies personally and all of that. So it's still a major issue, at least around the continent, particularly in the public sector. In the private sector, the challenges are not that much, because as an entrepreneur, you are looking at how to cut your costs, how to be competitive, how to make a lot more profit and all of that. So you are on top of ensuring that things are done efficiently. But of course, in some big organizations, there could be a bit of that, because there is what we call in management the agency theory, where the interests of the principals are always at variance with the interests of the agents. So this theory also play out in some aspects of the private sector. But generally, I think it's about the kind of structure of governance that you put in place, the kind of checks and balances that you put in place, and the commitment of either corporate leadership or political leadership to issues of transparency and good governance.
Thank you. Yes, you certainly encapsulated a lot into that response. And my immediate reaction is to direct this next question to Dr. Madu, because I know that he will want to say something about education and how important it is that fundamentally we all are educated in the tenets of the agreement and what the purpose of it is in order to buy into it. Dr. Madu, do you think that this is possible, and how do you think it's possible, and if so? You're on mute.
Sorry, Jenny, before I talk about education, I want to follow up on something that Dr. Muda said. A situation where you want the people who are benefiting from the corruption to implement a technology that will stop the corruption is not going to work. I'll give you an example. I did a proposal to kind of re-engineer the procurement department of a public sector agency. And a friend who works in the agency asked me a question which shocked me. He asked me, do you expect approval for this proposal? I said, yes, of course, that's why I brought it. If I don't expect approval, I would then, he asked me the second question. Do you expect those who benefit from the disorganized procurement to approve the reorganization of that same department? It was at that point that I caught it. And I put my proposal back into my bag and left. So that political will is very important. Without it, how do you bring technology in at all? They're talking about education. It's also about people understanding the opportunities that come from technology. Small and medium-scale enterprises being able to pivot from the way they used to do things. African Continental Free Trade Area provides opportunity, but to tell you the truth, I'm not too excited. I'm worried about readiness. I'm worried about logistics. I'm worried about corruption. I mean, let's take a look at the regional integration that we have had, like ECOWAS and the rest of them. You sign an agreement, free movement of people and goods. Go and find out how free those movements are. So to tell you the truth, I mean, people will say, how can you not be excited for this opportunity? But it's not about the opportunity, it's about ability to take hold of it. So really, people need to be educated a lot on the importance. The opportunities are huge, but how do we take advantage of it? You mentioned that we were the last country to sign. Should that be the case? The biggest economy in Africa? That's part of the challenge. So I don't know where we will start that education, but I think that it is very, very important. The private sector is doing quite a lot. Everybody is gearing up. But again, the next big challenge is logistics and supply chain. I think what we need to do is to leverage on some tech companies that have taken advantage of that. For example, there's a company in Nigeria called Kobo 360. Kobo 360 is currently in about 18 African countries. Such organizations will be a good place to start to build both the blockchain and the rest of the things that is required for the African Continental Free Trade Area. Thank you very much, Jenny.
Thank you. Sorry, just had to sneeze there. Yeah, thank you, absolutely. And as we are always agreed on, is that education is about so much more than textbooks and letters after your name. I mean, it is about life education, and this free trade agreement is going to be so potentially life-changing from an opportunity point of view that I think that here we're talking education that is knowledge and awareness as much as anything else. Dr. Mfeka, would you like to weigh in on this?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you, fellow panelists and our audiences. Well, you're spot on. I agree with fellow panelists regarding the role of education, of technology in procurement, as well the role of governance, as Dr. Yusuf put an emphasis, and as well as transparency. Those are key. It would seem the challenges that we're facing in the continent are almost similar with AfCFTA. I don't know if I'm spelling the acronym correctly. With AfCFTA in place, we have an opportunity to try to create some uniform rules and standards that will enable us to deal with issues of corruption in procurement. It's a highly contested area, procurement, as you would know. I always have a sense that politics is about procurement, basically, from large procurement transactions to smaller ones in different industries. You will understand the key value chains in Africa, where we're coming from mining, petrochemicals, oil, agriculture. You have huge value chains that needs to be transformed, and a government need to have capacity to plan, to create policies that are almost governed on the same principles, so that we evolve the spirit of the agreement to give confidence to investors and business people in the continent. Our panelists are correct. The cost of doing business across the continent is extremely high. And the lack of infrastructure, you still have colonial infrastructure that needs to be advanced quickly for these things to be a reality. And I would think that out of rare opportunities like these ones in this conference, we should be able to guide policymakers, because we are the business people. We know what will make the agreement work. Governments just create enabling environment. Business people understand, the risk, they understand the cost, they understand how to turn ideas into profitable ventures. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for that. And I'm reminded of the poll that took place in Azuka from Kimberly Clark's presentation yesterday, where she asked the audience how many people were wearing 5 or more items that were from or made in Africa, and 70% of the audience were wearing less than 5%. Only, I think it was 8% were wearing 5 or more items. And those are the sorts of opportunities. Somebody else in another presentation said how in the UK, for instance, there is such a demand for African products. And really those products that we have on the continent that are so hard to get from different African countries. And having had the opportunity to travel on the continent and how difficult it is to have to take a flight up to Dubai to get to West Africa from South Africa, or to go to Europe to get to Senegal, all these challenges that if we can try to alleviate that, that's got to be a positive, and it's got to be the incentive that the free trade agreement will bring for us. But as you say, we've highlighted the challenges such as infrastructure. Dr. Yusuf, is there anything you'd like to add at this point?
Yes. Well, I don't know whether this is the appropriate point to be talking about policy issues, issues of regulation, issues of institutions, because all of these things also impact or will impact on outcomes from the African continental free trade area. Issues of corruption and technology, well, we have dealt with that. But I still know that even in trade, in Nigeria, for instance, we have been struggling to get our trade processes to adopt technology for a long time. We are still struggling with that as we speak. We have found what we call the single window for purposes of trade at the ports, where all the agencies will key in, where we will have minimum interaction, physical interaction with agencies of government. But just as Dr. Madu said, because there are quite a number of elements benefiting from the non-use of technology, this thing has not worked for quite a long time. We have been on it for close to 10 years. As I speak to you, most of the cargo that we import into Nigeria, we still scan physically. That's what we call physical examination. The scanners have broken down for close to 5 or more years. And this is, we are still struggling to replace it. So it's an institutional issue. It's a governance issue. It's a question of commitment. And again, if there are elements that are benefiting from a corrupt system, sometimes to bring about reform can be very, very challenging. And let me also say that when we are talking about this CFTA, the quality of the individual country's trade policy is very important. Many countries on the continent are still, as we speak, many of them are still in protectionist mode. Many of them still feel that the best way to industrialize is to build a wall around your country. We are not completely out of that mode yet. You know? So the policy around industrialization is still not exactly where it should be. We talked about a poll that was conducted that maybe 80% of people or 5% were wearing what was made in their individual or made in Africa. But the thing about trade is for you to also identify what your strength is. You don't have to produce everything. We have a lot of things that we have in Africa that they don't have in many other parts of the world. What are we doing to ensure that we key into the global supply chain from the position of strength? In Nigeria, for instance, we are so blessed with oil and gas. How much of the value chain of the oil and gas have we developed? In many other African countries, they have minerals, they have primary agricultural products. How much of the value chain have we developed? So it's not about producing what they are producing elsewhere. It's about looking at your own environment and see what your strengths are. It comes back to the elementary principle of international trade. It's about a comparative and competitive advantage. We have not maximized that. Almost 90% of the food we eat in Africa are African food. The African food. Although sometimes we don't tend to reckon with that. Because if you take me out of here to Europe or something, one of the biggest problems I have is food. Because I don't enjoy the food outside my country. You know, and there are so many of us like that. So it is important that we address issues of policy. And for some of us, the foreign exchange policy of a country is also very critical to trade. Because you cannot trade if you don't have your foreign currency. You cannot trade if you cannot process international payments seamlessly. It's a major barrier. So if any country has this issue, just as we have in Nigeria with foreign exchange policy, it can be an impediment to trade. Then we have issues about non-tariff barriers, which is perhaps the biggest obstacle to trade. This is the experience we have in ECOWAS. Dr. Madu alluded to that. So it is one thing for you to free the trade and say, okay, there is free trade. You have removed tariffs. What of the non-tariff barriers, which are the biggest of the barriers? Even the biggest companies in Nigeria that try to move products across the West African sub-region, it's a nightmare. I can tell you that. It's a big nightmare. So these are issues that we need to relate with. Issues of regulation, trade policy, foreign exchange policy, issues of institutions, issues of non-tariff barriers. These are very, very critical. And of course, the issues of rule of origin. If we don't get it right with rules of origin, this CFTA will, if we are not careful, it will collapse. People begin to pull out of it. Because if you don't have the right institutions to enforce the rule of origin, then the whole confidence in the whole process, the whole confidence will collapse. And people will begin to interrogate the value that the AfCFTA is bringing on board. These are some of the reasons why Nigeria was slow in ratifying the agreement, because we have all these fears around institutions, around policies, and all of that. Jenny.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you know, once again, you've brought a lot of topics. One of the ones I was going to direct to Salisu, which I think is a very relevant one, is that of currency. We talked yesterday about a Pan-African currency. How practical, Salisu, do you think it is that we are looking to the cryptocurrency promise, I think? Will that work in Africa as part of the free trade agreement? And when I talk Africa, everybody, I'm not talking about Africa as a country, although the free trade agreement is going to make us talk more like that. What's your take on that?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jenny, and thank you all for the contribution. I think I'll still go back to what Dr. Yusuf has just highlighted. I think over the last weeks, months or so, there's been a lot of heated topic in Nigeria around digital currency, the regulations, and all of that. And this actually brought about the answer that we are, about the question that we are trying to answer at the moment. Is it going to work? Well, definitely I would say yes and no. Because at the end of the day, we have to look at the regulatory framework that we have in place, the capacity of the regulatory agencies, and the commitment in understanding the technology and perhaps what it means to introduce a digital currency or central bank digital currency. So, in terms of how it is going to work, the potential is there, but in terms of legal regulate, but operationalizing, looking at it from the legal point of view, and of course looking at it from the regulation, I don't think we are yet there. We are not yet there. So we really need to have a more or less open discussion about how we are going to tap from this innovation around cryptocurrency or digital currency. But honestly, with what other participants, other panelists have discussed about, in terms of institutionalization, and of course the areas around the commitment of government to innovation. I don't think this is going to be something that is going to happen at the moment. But in terms of potential, I can say yes, we have the potential. But in terms of implementation, I don't see that coming at the moment.
So, Obiora, I can see. Thank you, Salisu. Obiora, I can see you're keen to weigh in here. You're on mute.
Thanks, Jenny. Very important points raised. Looking at the rule of origin, which Dr. Muda raised, I've been part of the AGOA opportunity. And I know the role the rule of origin play. If not that the AGOA rules were very, very tight, the Asians would have used Sub-Saharan Africa as transit for their, but it was tight enough that it wasn't possible for any such fraudulent activities to happen. Again, going back to education, going back to competitiveness, going back to infrastructure. Someone mentioned earlier that the cost of doing business in African countries is very high, and the reasons are very, very obvious. Do we have trans-African highways? Those are not rocket science. If I want to buy coffee from Kenya, ordinarily, if there was a coastal shipping line, I will pick it up with ease, or it can come to me with ease. But once it goes to Europe, before coming to Lagos, the benefits will be lost completely. It will become easier, or rather more cost-effective to buy the foreign one straight from Europe than to buy that one. So I think that I hope those who are making the policies realize the challenges, because I was surprised one day I was on a panel on international TV, and a lot of people said they don't think that infrastructure is a problem. And I didn't understand why someone should be thinking like that, because it's not about, we have everything, we have everything. But the point is that how do you move it from one section to the other? I keep thinking about it, and each time we're jumping and getting excited about it, each time I look at that very particular place, it hurts me, and I don't know what we're going to do. I know that there have been some moves. For example, right now, in Nigeria, the National Action Committee on AfCFTA is trying to see, first of all, if they can find a sea link within ECOWAS, first of all, because if you were taking goods from Nigeria to Ghana, you put it on a small vessel, and then in a matter of days, you don't have to encounter, but just try to go by road. That's like 4 borders to cross, and you know what that means. So the education is also at the policy level to bring up these issues on the table so that we can slow down from this excitement and look at the challenges and then map out action and timelines on how we can resolve it.
Thanks, Obiora. As always, you know, everything revolves around education, everything, and supply chains as well. Bheki, have you got anything that you would like to add on at this juncture before I bring up my next question?
Yes, I think I want to make a distinction between two processes that are important in localization, because there is often a confusion when it comes to the role of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, as if it's about Africans, indigenous people, taking over completely in terms of the value chain, creating product. I think that Dr. Yusuf highlighted that it's very important to know the difference. If it's made in Africa, it means Africa will compete for production to come to Africa. And then we also compete to participate effectively by creating policies that are appropriate. And in that process further, you will have policies that enable further participation of Africans. I'll make an example. In South Africa, we have an automotive program that has been very successful. It is made up of all major automotive manufacturers from other countries. And because of the AGOA, once again, I think it's Dr. Madu will talk about the AGOA. Because of the incentive that were provided through that framework with the Americans, it enabled manufacturers to come over to South Africa. From there, we put incentives to them to say, okay, if you're going to locate, this is the incentive, tax incentive we're providing for you. And also some policy measures and regulations for inclusion of local businesses, small businesses, Black businesses who are previously not part of it. So it goes into phases. Those cars are made, BMW, Ford, they are made in South Africa. So, but now there's further localization that happens, which is another phase of it, where you now have to manufacture certain components and it's phased improperly. So those nuances are an opportunity that are presented by the Continental Free Trade Agreement for us to compete for production to be here in South Africa. In other words, create an enabling environment, a macro and microeconomic policy that enables investors to want to come here. So one of the compelling reasons, value proposition, is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That now, amongst other factors, will be a compelling proposition to investors to come over and, enhance our thinking around Made in Africa. Yeah.
Yeah. No, again, really, really astute. The whole localization discussion, it's huge, and the AfCFTA Free Trade Agreement will add to that. But again, if only if people understand the value of it and the potential and the opportunities. And I'm quite sure that Dr. Yusuf would like to say some things about that. I just want to raise something that Jeffrey has put in the discussion. I don't know whether you've seen it, but his point is that going back to the corruption discussion, and we always start on a negative and hopefully we'll end up on a positive. But he makes a very good point, which is, shouldn't we be saying corruption rather than saying corruption in procurement? It's corruption through procurement or procurement practices, which goes back to that whole legislation, processes, systems, technology, etc., that can help us. But it also raises a question that I'm quite passionate about, which is language. And obviously that's the written word or the spoken word, but what about our own individual languages, and how is the Free Trade Agreement going to cope with that? Already from a conference space, as we are, we have people who only speak French on the continent, and accommodating their requirements is extremely costly. South Africa, we have 11 national languages. How will we as a continent embrace a common language, and what cost will it add to our businesses if we're going to try to be democratic and embrace everybody's languages? So, Dr. Yusuf, there's a lot there to respond to. So I know you're capable of it. So go for it, please.
Yeah, can I speak to that?
Please.
Okay, thank you very much. First, before I address the issue of languages, I need to point that when we talk about trade, even within the context of the CFTA, we have trade in goods, we have trade in services. Now, in the services area, some of the challenges that you have identified may not be as profound as they are in the trade in goods or production in goods. In many of our economies in Nigeria, for instance, the service sector accounts for over 50% of our GDP. And generally, we are fairly strong in services. Even in the sub-region, we need to look at our financial services sector, our banks, in telecoms and all of that, in trading, and so in the services area, we are not doing badly. So we also need to recognize the potential that this offer. From Nigeria, America, and the rest of it. So if you have this AfCFTA, I think that also will provide a great opportunity for those in the services sector, whether they're in financial services, whether they are lawyers, they are architects. So that opportunity, I think, we need to recognize. Then language. That is such a big issue because for business people, the list of their worry is language. There are ways around it now. There are even technology, because the last time I went to China, they just gave me a small phone to just speak what I needed to say into it. As I said it in English, and I handed over the phone to the Chinese, and they interpreted it. You know, so they don't even need an interpreter anymore. They already have technology dealing with that. Because even now, we have more trade with China, whose language we don't speak, than even with our Commonwealth countries, for those of us that are English speaking. You know, so it is about the value that the trade provides, the value to both sides, to the ease with which you can do the business. How good is your destination for investors? I mean, Dr. Bheki talked about creating a destination, because all of this is also about attracting investment. Because these are value proposals of the AfCFTA. It's not only about investors from Africa, it's also about investors from other parts of the world, but in a way that will actually bring value to the continent. So the benefits from country to country will vary depending on the kind of environment that you provide. I can tell you with the AfCFTA, the Asians are waiting. Once it takes proper shape, they will look at countries that have very good investment environment. That is where they will go and set up and begin to target other countries that have the market, like Nigeria. You know, so these are the issues. The opportunities are there, but we need to create for us to be able to attract the investment and bring the capital, and the issues around all of this is what will determine the kind of value that we will get from it as individual countries. Because we also need to have investment policies around this, so that we don't have a situation where somebody is coming from Asia and is bringing practically the workforce and everything, including what they can source from Africa, bring it down to the continent. That will not provide the kind of value that we expect. So, not to stress, we have huge opportunities for some of us, particularly I know that of Nigeria, in the services sector. Language is not such a critical issue for me. What is most important is the value that we can get from trade. And more importantly, the issues of corruption, the less we have the space for public sector to perform, the better for anti-corruption positions. We have had institutions in this country which were monopolies, which were public sector owned. The moment we open up the space, like telecoms, all the problem of corruption around telecoms disappeared, because we brought in competition, People were competing, prices were going down, services became more efficient. So the smaller the public sector space, the better for the economies on the continent. The lesser the scope for corruption. You know, so those are my views around that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So it's very obvious. We definitely need to have another panel on that discussion. And I think that, you know, to sum that up, and unfortunately there was a little bit lost for me certainly, but I did get the overall message. But I think ultimately where there's a will, there's a way is as far as the language barrier is concerned, but also from a foreign investment point of view, we simply have to make ourselves more attractive. I promised at the beginning that I would give every panelist an opportunity to call for action. And I think it's well and good for us all to spend 2 days at an event like this, although I personally haven't attended an event of this value as far as Africa is concerned, and met so many different people from different African countries. But I think that it's important that we do actually remember the action part, because the talk is almost the easy part. So I'm going to put Salisu on the spot, and then each one. So I think that Dr. Yusuf is going to have the most time to think about his call to action. But I'll be interested to hear what they consider to be the important things that we really need to prepare ourselves to get ready to do, or actually to do. So Salisu, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much once again, Jenny. I think my discussion is going to center around 3 core areas. Number one, we have to really create the necessary awareness among stakeholders, and of course, we have to engage. The second part is to look at open partnership, whether in terms of technology, but perhaps interestingly, we have to look at 3 key flows of activities, which is information, finance, and the material that we are trying to trade with. It's really important. So this brings about the idea of open partnership. We have to really go into partnership. We have to understand what type of value addition we are adding in terms of all these partnerships. And number 3, I think we have to look at the economic benefits. And this has to do with our in-country values. It's really important because that's the idea why a lot of skepticism are there as to whether and to how this will affect my economy and all of that. And once we were able to assess and come up with a more innovative and more smarter way of approaching the CFTA, at the end of the day, we are going to have a revised implementation plan that is smarter, innovative, and of course can be sustainable. And I think the key stakeholders we are talking about here, obviously the private sector is a key player. You have to look at the education and research institutions. And of course, you have to look at the diverse industries, the key players within the industry, and above all, the government in terms of policy and regulation. But you have to do all these things at the heart of, you know, people putting people into the context. That's really important. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Salisu. That's lots of food for thought there. Obiora, over to you for your call to action.
Thanks, Jenny. And I think it's been very robust. And I want to take it from what Salisu said. That's from the education point of view. Jenny, you recall in the supply chain in action, we had a panel. What we were discussing is how do we kind of, is it indigenize, or how do we bring down education, create certifications that will address the challenges that we have in Africa. We have peculiar challenges. For example, you find certifications that talk about international trade globally, but it does not talk about the port location that I have in Nigeria or the one you have in South Africa. So again, coming together, collaboration is very, very key. Right now in supply chain, they say it's collaborate or die. And also, in fact, one author said that you should collaborate with the enemy if it will make you to succeed. So we have to adopt this co-opetition rather than competition as countries. Very, very important. Education-wise, production-wise, services which Dr. Muda mentioned is also very vital. Like if I said, if a logistics company, in fact, that doesn't own a truck, just owns the technology and the platform, is in 18 countries, heading to 25. They say that they will make it 25 in the next few days. So acceptance in those places, because Muda talked about, Dr. Muda talked about this question of restrictions, non-tariff barriers. We need to think about all that. So we need to create education that will address the challenges at the public sector level, at the private sector level. This morning in an earlier panel, we were talking about how do you prepare SMEs to take advantage of that. It means that even SMEs need to be educated. On the language issue, it's not really a challenge. Whether the person is a Japanese that doesn't speak English, if you say Incoterms, if you say FOB, he understands what you're talking about. So I think we can cope with that. But call to action is that education that works for Africa, that solves our problems. Education that will bring policy makers to understand the challenges that the people in the private sector who will do the real trading are facing, and then provide policies and enabling environment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Obiora. Totally agree. And again, it's that whole collaborate or die. I heard you say that earlier, and I think it's definitely something. I prefer Together Everyone Achieves More, which is an acronym for, or the long version of TEAM, which is an acronym for it. But collaborate or die, I think, and co-opetition. It's a phrase I'm hearing more and more and more as we work in this new normal. I think that's the first time I've heard that phrase, and I'm guilty of using it. So I think that, yeah, thank you very much. Bheki, would you like to take time now for your call to action?
No, thank you, Jenny. My call to action is 2 points. The first one is that we need to create governance rules that have teeth, that can bite, that are common throughout the continent. With the experience we've had with the African peer review mechanisms, we stand a good chance to come up with common corporate governance rules for the continent that will deal with corruption. And these rules must bind the public sector, the private sector, as well as civil society. That's the first point. The second point, we need to fast track phase 2 of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Phase 2 that deals with protocols and rules around investment, competition, and e-commerce. Those are important as a foundation for effective trade in the continent, and also inclusive of leveling the playing field, as well as ensuring that we do have the common understanding on the role of investors in our continent. We are on the right track, and I believe that this is one chance Africa has to transform its economy and become a major player in the world in terms of the global value chains and how Africa brings value that is tangible to the world, and everybody should say needs to come to Africa to invest. Thank you, Jenny.
I love that. I particularly like the reference to governance rules with teeth that can bite. I think that paints a really, really important picture, particularly as you know, from a South African perspective, but I think from a continent and from a global perspective. So thank you very much for that. Dr. Yusuf, I hope your internet is going to hold out for the last 5 minutes to give us an opportunity to hear your words of wisdom. Please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. Well, call to action. First, we need to ensure the reform of our customs across the continent, because the customs is very key to the success of the AfCFTA and anything that has to do with trade. They are practically at the center of trade activities. So reforming the customs is very key. Then reforming our policies, our trade policies especially. We need to reform and harmonize trade policies so that we don't have policies that are working against the spirit of the Continental Free Trade Agreement. We need to reform our foreign exchange policies where there are issues. I know that this is not a problem for all the countries on the continent, but some countries have this issue. The way they manage the foreign exchange, the way they fix rates, the way they do capital controls and all of that, those things impede trade. They impede investment flows, and they may negate the whole essence of African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So the foreign exchange policy has to be in alignment with the outcomes that we seek to see. Our industrialization policy also must be focused on competitiveness, must be focused on the resources that we have in each of our countries, so that we can have something that is more inclusive. Because when industrialization is also based on resources that you have, whether human resources or natural resources, it has a way of making the benefits of trade more impactful. It has a way of building an economy that is much more inclusive. Then definitely, in the AfCFTA, there will be costs and there will be benefits. The costs and benefits is not going to be the same for all countries. It's going to be a function of issue of readiness, which Dr. Madu alluded to earlier. It's going to be a function of the quality of our infrastructure. It's going to be a function of the quality of our policies, the quality of our institutions. So individually in each of our countries, we need to address these issues. Otherwise, we could have an AfCFTA that doesn't provide a win-win. And when countries begin to feel that they are not benefiting much as they are losing, it could pose a risk to the AfCFTA. So it is important that individual countries look at all these challenges of competitiveness, because at the end of the day, trade is about competitiveness. That is the only way countries can benefit from trade. So basically, I think those are my parting words, call to action as far as this conversation is concerned. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yusuf. I think to use Bheki's words, or to go back to the very beginning, where I posed the question, is this a pipe dream, or is it hope, or is it reality? And looking at some of the comments in the discussion, I think we're all agreed there's a long way to go to make this reality. But I think that we have to keep hope, and we have to do what we can around awareness, education, and any practical steps that we can take to get ready for it. Because as Bheki said, was that it's our one opportunity to really transform the economy of the continent. And I think that if we really want Africa to be considered as a major player in the world, on the world's economic front, then we need to grab this opportunity and do what we can to make it work. And at least we can say we tried, and at least we can say that we tried together. And I hope that in time we'll go back to this conversation and take note of the call to action that everybody raised, the calls to action that everybody raised, and know that maybe we went away from here and we kept them in the back of our mind, or better still, we actively went and tried to influence something, some area of it. And maybe we just keep talking about it until our respective governments realize that we need governance with teeth that can bite. So on that note, I'm going to say a very, very big thank you to amazing panelists. It certainly just makes me very proud to be an adopted African, I have to say, even though I adopted myself here. But I think that, come home, Salisu, come back to the continent. Scotland doesn't need you anymore, we do. And thank you all very, very much indeed. It's been a great discussion, a great way to end up what I think has been a very important, an extremely important gathering of Africans wanting to be a part of Made in Africa. So thank you all for your participation. Pearl, are you there?
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jenny. Thank you all.
I sure am. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you, Jenny, for doing such an amazing job in that panel. Well, we've enjoyed 2 days of incredibly insightful and informative presentations and panel discussions, networking and conversation. We must continue to drive the SMME agenda and not leave this event as a talk shop. We are all in this together, and it is in all our best interest to get this right. We must do the hard work to strengthen the economy, not just for our future, but also for that of our children. We have such talent. There is so much potential. We need to turn that into opportunity and then growth. We need a task team to keep the momentum going, to keep the wheels turning. Slow and steady is better than nothing at all. Who supports this idea? Just by being here, I know you do. Remember that collaboration and partnership are key components to successful business. To strive to obtain these for your businesses, whether you are an SMME or in procurement. Every one of you that attended Made in Africa 2021 have shown your support and interest just by being here over these last 2 days. I hope that you have taken away something of value from this event. Thank you for your time and attending MIA. We appreciate you. Thank you for our speakers for the time and effort you have put in. We look forward to keeping you engaged and updated on further activities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.